Welcome to the J3U University Podcast. I'm your host, John Jewett.
And I'm your co-host, Luke Miller.
Our mission is to elevate the physique coaching standard
and to bring the highest level of competitor to the stage.
Let's jump into today's episode. Changing your split is stopping your progress. And I know you're going to take a step back and say, what do you mean, John? Like, changing my split is how to make progress. But that's not always the case, as there are issues a lot of times with full-on program hopping, and I know the excitement of a program hop. But what we want to do today is kind of break down why the massive change, the overhaul, isn't always necessary. A lot of times it's more just strategic, more nuanced changes that take place, but we'll also cover when there might be a chance where you should do a complete program hop. Luke, how you doing?
I'm good, man. This is another topic that's just like right in my wheelhouse. I could talk for hours about this, and I think it comes from a place of knowing that the long-term development of the athlete a lot of times comes from small detail work. Like, I think that you see this kind of become a topic of discussion post-show with a lot of people where they do well, but maybe they don't win the pro card or maybe they don't win the Olympia qualification. And so they come off like expecting this massive plan overhaul that's going to be the secret to them winning the pro card or the Olympia qualification, right? And in reality, if you look at the progress between the last time they competed in this show, there was a ton of progress made. It just might be a situation where more time is needed. So I love this conversation because getting really good at the skill of training, and that's how I prefer to talk about it, is the skill of training, because it is something that you develop over time, is really the key to any program design. And then the small refinements and tweaks are kind of what put you over the edge as far as reaching your true potential.
Have you yourself ever done like a big program hop, like in the past? Man. Do you remember like any specific like XYZ program you hopped around between?
I'm about to show my age here, but which I'm 30, so I guess I'm not that old. But
you're not old.
I've been doing the bodybuilding thing for too long. I remember when I bought the Ben Pakulski like black and green binder. What was it called? Like Max Hypertrophy or something. And it was like all the discs. And it was this like massive high volume like training split. And I had been training more like progressive overload, like effort, like lower volume. And this was before we were working together. And I was like so enamored by this. And it went from like, your typical, 10 to 12 sets of, let's say, quads per week. Like you were doing like 22. And it was like massive, like 5-6 sets on hacks and stuff. And I just remember the excitement around that. But I also remember the lack of progress that happened as a result of absolutely burying myself to no utter end. And I think that like massive pivot in program design is kind of where I started to fall in love with the nuance of driving training, because I saw that the massive shift didn't work. So it's actually why it comes to mind first, because it's where I fell in love with like the ins and outs of program design.
Yeah, my first like big hop was I was doing powerlifting, like West Side barbell style conjugate method. I was like, I'm going to bodybuild. And this is when I was in my bachelor's program. And so I wanted to be more sciencey, right? So I'm like, okay, what is some type of evidence base? Like I want to do the right optimal thing. And I came across Brian Haycock's HST training, hypertrophy specific training, which was actually pretty solid. It was more like full body training. I think there was a 4-day split that I ended up settling on, but nearly it was like full body every day, coming from powerlifting, coming from being able to like take sets to the end. I buried myself. It was brutal. And also just wasn't really as enjoyable with my psychology of how I like to train. And then from there, I kind of like had to regroup and fell into DC training and bought like Justin Harris's. Him and Steve Kuklo had Project Super Heavyweight. It was like a DVD, right? DVDs, what is that? And I got that, and I fell into like the dog crap, intense muscle forum. And finally there was like a culture of people that were just bought in to that, piece. So kind of creating that belonging was a huge part of it, but also like it was a just tried and proven method. So stuck with that for a long time, and it fit really well with my psychology and a lot of like great framework there for what drove progress forward. So that was kind of the early initiatives there. And honestly, if you look back, like I think across training, like the core system of DC from what I do now, some things haven't really changed that much. Like those core pillars were still there. What makes like a good program. But anyway, it was always looking like what's the next thing that's optimal, I think is what we're always want. And I think we get our feedback from our show. We're very like focused on right in front of our nose. Like the judge said, you need to bring up your chest. You're like, man, all right, well, what's my new chest training split that I need? And it's like, well, wait a second. What have you been doing? And has your chest actually been improving? You just still need more time of doing the same thing versus let me now train chest 3 days a week and I'm going to tear a pec off. It's like, no, don't do the complete overhaul just yet. So I think this comes back to now where we have the audit, right? Of what do we look at to actually take away from how do we assess our current plan and move forward from there.
Yeah, the audit's huge. It's funny, like you guys will see me post comparisons side by side sometimes where it's like where an athlete started with me to kind of where they're at now or some change of time. A lot of times that's from the audit. That's from me reevaluating like how has the training progressed this physique and has it moved it in the direction of winning more often or more likely to win in the class they're trying to compete in. And that audit I think can be multivariable. I do like a couple different comparisons. So I've always loved the comparison of the highest level that you're at versus you. So that would be like the most recent national winner versus your physique if you're an amateur, or the most recent Olympia winner to you if you're a pro. And then on top of that would be the change of the period of time the program design was ran. So like the starting visuals versus the back end visuals. And I think it's a really good way to get the subjective metrics from like a visual perspective, because that's what's actually judged on stage. And I do this fairly often, like often relative to how often you change program designs. So I'd probably say like at least once every 4 to 6 months, I'm doing this with my athletes, usually at the ends of their phases, depending on how long someone's off-season phase lasts. But man, it's so important because when you compare the initial physique with the initial program design to the now physique with the now program design, it makes it very clear and objective of what levers and toggles you pulled and how that resulted. And then it tells you what levers and toggles to pull in the next program. It's pretty simple.
In looking over the audit, because, we have people that in the J3U forum, they'll post the new split I'm going to be doing and all the exercises and all the sets that they're doing. And what we don't see is like, what were you doing before? Mm-hmm. And I think this is also when you might have more of an overhaul that takes place, because even with new clients that we have come in, they'll send us our training. And when we see more of the kind of the full, if we want to call it a program hop, is when their past program wasn't really meeting those tenets of hypertrophy very well. Mm-hmm. And, where we have like high quality sets that are executed at that high effort level with accuracy. And that might be instead looking at lots of sets at lower effort levels. I think of the female side, bikini side, of doing lots of like band type of pump work to where we're not getting a lot of quality work in. Now, some of those splits very well might already cater to body parts, but some of them times we do see it's still like I have guys coming with a generalized bodybuilding split, trying to bring up body parts that aren't coming up. And that's when we might need some shift into specialization that does take place, which is more of a training just transition over like a huge hop in design. But I think that hop might happen when, you're seeing more of those like things that are just the basics of what good hypertrophy should look like not happening, which a lot of the programs I see it have some existence of that, but things that have like a lot of set extenders or very short rest times, lots of the type of pump work, like those are things that could add a bit more excess fatigue in versus the stimulus that they provide. Those are some of the transitions to make around that. But for the most part, it's always looking back at what they were doing and how does that align with these quality tenets of hypertrophy, then shift them to that. Then we might need some time to like reassess where to go from there.
Yeah. And I think that like coming back to the audit and the assessment piece, like I think it's something that you do like a visual comparison, but I love a training comparison, like a training video comparison. Like how did the execution hold up across the training block? Because that's a large part of how much you get out of a program design. And I find that this works really well with the people that are, I would say, maybe newer to being pretty detail oriented with their training, because they can see how the emotional, like, which I love the passion, like I love coaching passionate athletes, but the passion can derail you from focusing on what's actually going to drive you forward. And I think that's an audit that has to happen as well when you pivot phases, like whether it's like all season into a transition phase, you're pulling volume down and you're reevaluating how that program did, or it's post show or whatever it might be. Like, man, there's such value in a training video audit as well.
Yeah, just to give some like action takeaway items for people listening, like how you could do this is that I would say do it over relatively all body parts, but mainly your compound movements that require a lot more skill acquisition is, week 2 potentially, because week 1 still kind of figuring out, maybe week 2 of your block, like film those lifts, save them in a drive folder week 2. And then at the end of this block, which usually a good timeline for blocks is kind of 8-week segments, have those lifts, that same lifts that go back into that folder to where you can compare them over time and see how much they transition on a week-to-week basis. Like you might, if you have a good eye, you might be able to catch things. What you're probably catching is like that exercise didn't quite feel the same this time, which you can always go back to your week 2 where you had like a really good execution to review. But over time, if across this block you're seeing that one really shift, that's something to rein back in, especially for the body parts that you want to be improving on. So just save these things, put them in something that you can actually track with. I also kind of look at like lift progression. If I have a lift that's like just scaling out the wazoo, right? You're like, man, am I actually putting on all this chest tissue right now? And then it's like, oh no, I'm just like shifting my form for the worse, the better to lift more weight, but for the worse for actually stimulus. Because once you've gone past the novelty of a new exercise and those your like neuromuscular changes that you get, the actual like moving load from tissue increases is pretty slow for once you're in that intermediate stage, especially to advanced, to where you're not taking like big 10-pound jumps on like you're pressing every single week or gaining reps, 1-2 reps every single week. Like that's not really the reality of what you're probably seeing. And if you are, that's when I start to question, like maybe we should do a form reevaluation.
Yeah, it's pretty big. I think one of the things to kind of understand too is that there's multiple ways to kind of progress within blocks. And I think that's pretty important and why the audit holds so much value, because I've had some people that run movements for multiple blocks in a row, like 3, 4, 5 blocks in a row. But when we go in these like little transition periods where we do the audits, some of this like ways to progress forward is by raising your glass ceiling and correcting some of the things that you started to let slip. Because like there's some patterns, and I know you've done this, like you got this favorite machine and you're starting to max it out and you're like, oh no, where do I go from here if it doesn't like take a gym pin? And then you watch like the first week you did it to like the last week you did it, and you're like, that's not even the same movement pattern. And you're so excited because when you reset it, you've like ticked off a couple notches where you have more room on the machine. It's like there's so much value in that across the board. Like you can build so much progression without injuries. And I think that's a big piece of this, where it's like one way to build more progression in the blocks is to have that accuracy in training open up the ability to have more load to progress up. And it's also going to build more progression because it's going to keep you off the injury reserve list, which is a huge detriment to consistently stringing blocks together for maximal progress, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point on your end of block evaluation, is those ones that have shifted form of like the next block instead of an exercise swap out, right, it's just shifting back to the old form, which in turn is like reopening, raising the ceiling again for what you can do stimulus wise. To that same point, I know a lot of people ask like, hey, this one lift is progressing really slow. Like, is it time to swap it out? Or is it just par for the course and I'm just adapting slow and I should just ride this out? How do you usually go about tackling that type of issue? Thanks everyone for tuning in to today's podcast. Are you struggling to hit your peak on show day? Feeling lost in the off season? Upgrade your coaching game with J3 University. Our program covers everything from off season to contest prep to peak week, all based from real client results. Along with our comprehensive physique curriculum, you'll also get access to our 4 rooms with our J3U team to answer any questions you have and live Q&A sessions to further your coaching and athlete experience. We are the source of education for top IFBB pros and coaches. Join us to elevate the coaching standard at J3 University. Let's get back to today's podcast.
Yeah, I always tell people like slow progressions are necessarily not a bad thing. Like it's still providing a hypertrophy stimulus. Like I look at it more on a session basis. Like if we have 3 sets, and usually it's the top set that gets a little tough to progress. Like the top set will stall, but then the 2 back offs, like if there's 3 sets, will progress. And that's kind of usually where you see it. A lot of times I see that issue is there's a deload that's needing to come up. So there's like some neural recovery fatigue that needs to happen, or there's a form issue that's the only reason they got to that top set load is because they've leveraged themselves into that position. So I tend to find more often that rather than a movement swap needing to happen, it's one of those 2 in those situations where I'm able to open the door to more progress by resetting the lift or doing the deload that is clearly coming up. Now, there are cases where this might lead to movement swap, but man, I need to see it stagnate for a pretty decent period of time. Like I'm talking like 2-3 weeks, probably 3-4 weeks of minimal progressions.
Do you think there's any grounds for like a more advanced guy? Because I know, like, hey, if a movement's progressing, and for an advanced guy, it's probably all kind of slow across the board relatively, where every block there should be some rotation. If you're not within that block having enough variation anyway, more as a preemptive measure to prevent like just repetitive movement injuries from occurring, or just, beating up the same like lines of connective tissue.
I could see it like more so from an injury profile perspective than I would argue it from a progression perspective, probably.
And one and the same almost, right? Because injured, you're not progressing. So I guess maybe that depends on the history of the individual, right? If they have like a reoccurring problem.
Exactly.
Because like I'll fall into patterns myself where I'm like, all right, the squat's working for now until like I just keep doing it. Then I rotate another one, then keep doing that one. And then I kind of keep recurring into the same kind of issue. But first, maybe you have a deep set root cause that you should be addressing there. But, otherwise potentially there's some grounds for like rotating some lifts. And if you're not having a set, like we have some guys that rotate like a B type of rotation, and maybe that's enough to do it alone. Or if you're running just an A rotation, maybe the next segment you have like your B rotation that you move to from there. I think for potentially isolation exercises, I mean, for one, how many variations of a leg extension can you do? It's like, it's just a leg extension. But for like some compound work, there could be some potential around there.
Yeah, you see it a lot more in like the squatting, and then occasionally in pressing, depending on the person and the injury profile. You see it a little bit less in like pulling and stuff, like the need to switch based off injury profiles. But I think that kind of covers the aspects that would hold you in a program design. I think there's a pretty big conversation to be had about when is change needed, right? We've touched on it some. What are the biggest red flags that you see in regards to like change being needed to be had?
Yeah, for one, I think just getting overly aggressive off what you want to do in your initial blocks. Mm-hmm. And I've been there with them thinking like, we talked about this on, I think, a previous podcast. Like in prep, I could train 6 days a week with like low volume and short sessions. And I wasn't like peak strength, right? So you move in the off season, food goes up, gear goes up. I'm thinking like, yeah, 6 training sessions a week, that was fine. But then like strength rapidly progresses, and like on a per set basis is just a large slam of the hammer down with fatigue as well. And so it quickly like backfired. So it's like, well, okay, you're running a 6 day per week session with how this is all spread out. That's almost a complete rearrangement of that split design into 5 days. Not really, it's hard to say that's a program hop, because we're not like at this stage, we're not really following like a program, right? I'm not moving from like the John Meadows program to like the whatever XYZ program, but it's more of like, that's more of a massive shift in a program rearrangement that would take place. So if you're running to where, hey, you can't string together 6 to 8 weeks of training before needing a deload, or you're running into like numerous connective tissue problems, like it probably is you're training beyond your recovery capacity and need to make a larger adjustment than just switching out a couple exercises or adding a set or removing a set here or there.
Yeah, I think the other place that you'll see it too is there are times where post-show that I think there is a revamp that's needed. A lot of times it's with I think there's 2 sections of client that this happens. It's like the person who's almost across the line for the pro card, and there's like one body part that really is just like keeping them from getting it. Or on the same level, like the pro trying to make it to the Olympia, like they've got some seconds and thirds, and it's just like one body part that's keeping them from getting there. And this is where it's time to push the needle on that specialization of like, okay, something's got to change here. Something's got to give, and we've got to sacrifice progress in one area to really make this something that's competitive. And that's where the other big program hop red flag for me is like, when you're that close for that long, there sometimes has to be shift to make it get across the line.
And to give an example of that too, like I'm working with Carlos Thomas Jr. on his programming, which if you look at his quads, they're ridiculous. Most of his body parts are ridiculous. And initially post-show, like coming from prep, we were keeping food pretty low just to keep body fat low. Not a lot of recovery resource there to create like a specialized training split. I wasn't ready to pull like his strong body part volume like way back down to a maintenance level, but also drive up the weak body parts with a high amount of volume either. So we were running like a push-pull legs off, push-pull, training legs once a week, and having back hit twice a week, which if you know Carlos, like we really wanted to focus on back. So now food's up, gear's up, we're pushing a growth phase, but Carlos doesn't need more legs. Like they're enormous. Carlos also doesn't need more chest. Definitely doesn't need more arms. His arms are crazy. Yeah. So it's like delts and back. That's our focus. But what has Carlos not done before? And that's what I was looking at. He hasn't run like a very high volume frequency dedicated back split. So this is when the revamp happened, like moving into this growth phase, now training back every 3 days. At which pretty much adds a whole nother session in for the week of what we were doing. Legs is now trained like once every 10 days with very low volume. So it's very just maintenance. And then we still have like delt frequency across all those sessions, some delt work put into pull sessions as well. And then actual like chest arm work is far less. I think it's like twice spread across 10 days now. So devolumization of legs and arms, chest, and upping delts and back. And that is like a pretty big revamp. But when you need to be like with a pro, someone with that much tissue, completely allocating it differently. I did the same thing with Sam Pierce, he's like 300 plus pounds in the off season, right? He's a massive guy and a very strong guy. So he needs to bring up like legs and back. I can't do that all in one segment. So now that looks like an 8-week block where we dedicate to legs. Then what you can do to save some of the connective tissue stuff and from being just a strong dude is switch to an 8-week block of back. And we can rotate between these blocks, specialization cycles. And that's kind of an advanced way of programming where you are having more of a massive shift of like the program hop.
Man, I tell you what, it's being a strong dude's one of the hardest things to manage. Like you talk about coaching Sam, like one massive like that, right? Like from just a total body weight perspective, but just the per set stimulus that they can provide is so high. It's like your volume shifts are so small, like the ranges you can shift volume because like each set addition is just so much stimulus. It's like you're almost getting to the point where, yeah, you obviously need to be strong to provide a lot of stimulus to progress in bodybuilding, but there is a point where strength can be a detriment, in my opinion.
I'd rather be a weak bodybuilder, 100%. Like,
yeah,
I know the goal, right? Of like, well, you need to be doing more load reps over time, but I almost want to be doing the least amount of load rep progressions needed to keep growing as fast as possible. So it's like, that's kind of bodybuilding in turn. Like, yes, eventually if you're big, you will be doing more load reps, but the goal is not more load reps in a way. And maybe that's convoluted, but I think people understand the idea because prepping someone that's strong when you can do like a 700-pound back squat for reps, imagine how one set feels like. It's like it could bury you. You're still the same human nervous system wise. So versus that same person only needing to do a 400-pound squat for the same level of stimulus. It's like, it's much more to manage. Like the needle moves faster for fatigue and for having to like pull someone back. It's just much more dynamic, and the energy output too, right, is much greater too. So just a small little tangent on managing strong people, but
that's my fat. Is there anything else you would see, like you would want to highlight within the change aspect of this podcast? Or
well, I would say, to those listening about these advanced guys doing this, don't think that the advanced thing is the thing that advances you, because that's, an aspect of like you're wanting for guys that need a lot of tissue, because I see guys that like you do have a weak body part, and I would want to very hesitant on moving to a very specialized split, because you might be leaving a lot of progress on the table for these major body parts that are going to progress you a lot faster on stage. So if you need like 20 pounds of stage weight, no, you shouldn't be running like a chest training every 3 days and only training legs once a week. Like you're not going to gain that amount of tissue onto your chest. You could probably easily just make some slight volume shifts to accomplish that job. Especially someone earlier on, there's probably a lot of execution improvements you can still be making. So, bring in the advanced aspects and specialization once you're there. Don't start with that, because again, that's not the way to advance quickly.
Yeah, it's people want it because they want to be the advanced guy, but it's like you really don't, because you don't realize how hard it is to progress at that point. And I tell people all the time, like, silhouettes win a lot of shows. Like, God, silhouettes win a lot of shows, especially at the amateur level where they're judging quick and you get pulled to the center quicker, and it's just be a massive dude on stage and or girl.
Yeah, it's like build out that X-frame. And speaking of program hopping, maybe the people should hop to the X-frame program that we sell on J3U for the limited time off. No, I'm just kidding, guys. It is a good program.
It is a good program. Oh goodness. Anything else? I think my biggest thing is, boring is winning. Like, it is such a hard thing to sell, but man, does it produce some really good freaking athletes.
Yeah, winning's not boring.
Winning's not boring, but
making progress isn't boring.
But the day-to-day tasks to win can be boring.
It is. It's like, well, doing these same exercises that I always do. But I think the fun part of that is still like within that exercise, trying to create the improvement. Because every time I'm in a movement, it doesn't matter what it is, I'm still like thinking about how I can improve the execution in it, and manage my session overall. So there's still like, and just the enjoyment. Like you should just enjoy to train. Like, keep your perspective if you're feeling bored in your session, that you're able right now to walk in the gym on your own 2 feet and train and have a good time, get stronger, get a pump. Like, that is a great day. I think Renee Bless her heart. She dropped a 45-pound plate on her toe doing a belt squat and just fell from like 3 feet high and fractured her whole toe, right? So she's on crutches. She can barely walk on it. She can't train right now at the moment. We're going to get her there though, doing some isolation stuff. But think about it. Like, what if you had a broken toe right now? You'd be so upset. Renee wishes she could go do the boring movements she did over and over and over again. So keep your perspective if you're feeling bored in your program, because bodybuilding greatness comes from a lot of just consistent monotony of doing the right things, and keep your program consistent and progressive. And that's the main thing that you're looking for, and you're doing bodybuilding right. So I think we can wrap it up there, Luke. Next week, everyone, we're going to talk about the mistakes of refeeding on a hard prep and when you should probably be doing something else instead of refeeding. And that's your teaser that we'll cover next time. So anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week.